Is the Director of Research and co-founder at Triangle, and he joins us now from Beirut as well. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on the program. Now, the last thing that Lebanon needed was a political row among all the other issues that it has to deal with. What's at stake here for Lebanon, and will they be able to find a quick solution to this problem?
I mean, there's lots at stake in Lebanon. We're speaking about if we lose the Gulf market, basically a third of Lebanese exports would be halted. And already we have a financial crisis that has been going on since 2019. This would only exacerbate the economic frailties of the system. I mean, how to get out of this is a very complex answer. I don't think anybody really knows. What we know is that the Gulf is fed up because they believe that they've invested billions in Lebanon and they don't get the return on investment. The French, for example, Macron tried to fix this by urging the Saudis to reinvest in Lebanon. However, I think from the perspective of the Saudis, they believe that, as I said, it's a bad investment. So why give billions of dollars while Lebanon remains a platform for Hezbollah and Iranian-backed militias that continue to fight, actually, the Saudis in Yemen, in Iraq. So I think from the perspective of the Gulf, it's a national security issue. For Lebanon, I mean, we've seen that Najib Mikati, according to the Taif Accord, for example, he cannot even ask the relevant minister who did this to even resign, because according to the Taif Accord, the Council of Ministers United could take such a decision.
Right.
Which means we're also in a gridlock internally.
Right. So you don't think that we can see him resign, because from what I know, he's already come out and said that he's not resigning.
He's not. He said he's not resigning, and at the same time, Najib Mikati cannot actually, by the constitution, tell him to resign. So it's like a bind. I think that what is happening though now is not about just a minister of media that did a mistake. I mean, what we're talking about here is a bigger issue. And I think this is part of the twisting of hands between Iran on one side and the Gulf and the United States on the other. As we know, there's already negotiations being held, and so this should be seen as part of a regional, if you want, fight. Right. So I mean, and even the Saudis have come out and said that this is not about a media minister, and that if we needed to talk to Iran, why not talk to Iran directly? Mm-hmm. So they're saying that Lebanon is becoming more and more irrelevant, and that it's becoming more and more Iranian, in a way, kind of colonized state, or Iranian occupied state.
Right. I want to take a moment and talk about the people of Lebanon and how they're feeling the impact of this crisis. Economically, Lebanon isn't doing well. People are feeling that really deeply in their own homes. What are the repercussions of this crisis on the economic side?
I mean, currently Lebanon is witnessing a hyperinflationary scenario. We're speaking about the economy has been in recession for the past 2 years. With this hit, it's going to just unemployment is going to spike, obviously, and we're going to see more hyperinflationary where the lira collapses even more. However, I think what will change now is that what is at stake is the remittances. The remittances in Lebanon have historically kept the economy alive, and actually they kept Lebanon from fully melting down into a Somalia-like situation. I think with the remittances stopping, this is the biggest fear now in Lebanon. There's lots of rumors on the streets that actually the Gulf countries are going to kick out the Lebanese expats. If such a scenario happens, we're speaking about thousands of Lebanese abroad coming back home, and that would definitely produce a mega crisis in Lebanon, because now we're talking about the lifeline of Lebanese families being cut down.
Right.
And that would definitely create lots of chaos, I think, back here.
Okay, Director of Research and co-founder at Triangle, Nizar Ghanem, thank you so much for joining us here on the News Hour.
Latest news. Hezbollah chief slams Saudi Arabia for Lebanon diplomatic rift. The Arab League envoy in Beirut to mediate Lebanon-Saudi rift. Al Jazeera headliner. Hezbollah chief slams Saudi Arabia for Lebanon diplomatic rift. Dated November 11. 2021. Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah has blasted Saudi Arabia for trying to stir instability in Lebanon amid a weeks-long diplomatic dispute between the latter and several Gulf countries. In a televised speech on Thursday, Nasrallah accused Saudi Arabia of violating Lebanese sovereignty and dismissed calls for the departure of embattled Information Minister George Kordahi. He went on to say, Hezbollah supports the Information Minister's position of not resigning. Rejecting external dictates is one of the simplest manifestations of sovereignty. The diplomatic crisis was sparked last month after video footage circulated online from an August interview in which Kordahi made several critical remarks about the Saudi-led coalition's war against Houthi rebels in Yemen. The former game show host said Iran-aligned Houthis are defending themselves against an external aggression, earning praise from Iran-backed Hezbollah. In response, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Bahrain called their envoys from Beirut and expelled the Lebanese ambassadors. Saudi Arabia, which considers Hezbollah a terrorist organization, also banned all imports from Lebanon, accusing it of failing to take measures to stop the export of scourge of drugs. Bahrain said the UAE have called on their citizens to leave the country, while Yemen's internationally recognized government has since recalled the envoy from Beirut. Hezbollah made Lebanon an arena and a launching pad for implementing projects of countries that do not wish well for Lebanon and its brotherly people, the Saudi statement said on October 29th. Nasrallah accused Saudi Arabia of trying to destabilize cash-strapped Lebanon, spark a civil war through their allies, and serve Americans and Israeli interests. Nasrallah went on to say they have a problem with their allies because they want them to fight Hezbollah and wage a civil war in Lebanon. And in Lebanon, they either do not want a civil war or they are unable to take on one. He also dismissed Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farban's remark that Hezbollah has hegemony over Lebanon as nonsense. Others have more influence on us in one state, in the judiciary, the army, the secretary forces, and administrations, Nasrallah said, noting that Hezbollah has been unable to remove Beirut port explosion investigator Judge Tariq Bitar, have Iranian fuel tankers docked directly in Lebanon, or fully restore ties with the Syrian government. Saudi Arabia has distanced itself from Lebanon in recent years, often criticizing it for Hezbollah's growing influence in Lebanese politics. Kordahi was appointed by the Mardada movement, a Christian party closely allied to Hezbollah and Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Associated Press headliner Arab League envoy in Beirut to mediate Lebanon-Saudi rift, dated November 8, 2021. The top Arab League envoy was in Beirut last Monday to explore ways to resolve an unprecedented diplomatic rift between Lebanon and Saudi Arabia that emerged following comments by Information Minister on Yemen's civil war. The minister had criticized the war in Yemen that a Saudi-led coalition is waging against the Iran-backed Houthi rebels. The Arab League official said his visit was an initiative to put the crisis on the right track. Hossam Zaki, the league's deputy chief, told reporters after meeting Lebanese President Michael Aoun that he was ready to visit Saudi Arabia, that some tangible moves to ease the crisis had to be felt first. Zaki went on to say, the interests of Lebanon and Gulf nations are our goal, plan to do to end this crisis. Lebanon had said that Information Minister Kordahi's remarks about Yemen, aired in late October, do not represent official government views. Zaki later, Monday, met with Lebanese Prime Minister Majid Makati and the country's parliament speaker. Zaki went on and said that Kordahi resigned earlier, would have ended the crisis from the start, but the situation continued. He said Lebanese leaders told him during the meetings that the crisis should end and are hoping that Kordahi resigns. Aoun's office said the president told Zaki that there should be a separation between what the government announces and statements made by individuals, especially if they have no official post. Aoun was referencing to Kordahi's comments he made before being a minister. Aoun added that Lebanon is ready to take the steps to improve relations with the Gulf nations, especially Saudi Arabia, based on mutual respect of sovereignty. Makati's office quoted the prime minister as saying that Lebanon wants normal relations to be restored with Saudi Arabia and Gulf Arab nations, adding that the Arab League can play a role in that. Mikati also said that Lebanon will remove all obstacles to restore the relations, according to his office. The spat has threatened to destabilize Mikati's government formed in September after a 13-month deadlock between rival Lebanese groups. Mikati also urged Kordahi to do what needs to be done, an apparent appeal for him to step down, but the minister has so far refused to apologize or resign. Saudi Arabia has withdrawn its ambassador from Beirut and asked the Lebanese envoy to leave the kingdom. It also banned Lebanese imports, undermining the small nation's foreign trade, depriving it of millions of dollars, even as it struggles amid an economic meltdown. Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait have also pulled out their ambassadors to Lebanon, deepening the spat between the Gulf and Lebanon. Kordahi, who was named to the government by a party allied to the militant Hezbollah group, has insisted Yemen's Houthis have the right to defend themselves and said he did not mean to offend with his comments, which were recorded before he became minister. And that is the latest news. And now my thoughts on the matter. Well, to understand the dispute, one needs to reverse. The dispute came between Lebanon and Saudi Arabia, in which on November 4th, 2017, in a televised statement from Saudi Arabia, the Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri tendered his resignation from office and citing Iran and Hezbollah's political overextension in the Middle East region and fears of assassination. Even though Iran had vehemently rejected Hariri's remarks and called his resignation part of a plot by the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia to heighten Middle East tensions. That on November 21st, just 2 weeks later, Hariri declared in Beirut that he had suspended his resignation. And he also stated that President Aoun had asked him to put it on hold ahead of further consultations. And he refused to talk about what happened in Saudi Arabia. He claimed that the events will remain undisclosed. Saudi Arabia has also opposed Hezbollah's influence in Lebanon and its involvement in the Syrian civil war, as the group is seen strongly aligned with Iran. You'll notice that a lot of these things tie into one. You have Lebanon, you have Syria, you have Iran, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf, Israel, the United States. This is about regional dominance between the Sunni and the Shia. When it comes to Saudi Arabia, for Israel and the United States, it's basically a further destabilization of Arab countries, as well as upholding, to some extent, past foreign policies, as well as the Ota Dinam plan, and as well as the outlines of the project for New American Century, and the neocon outlines in the mid-90s. This is all coming to play 20 years later. It takes a while, but it's coming into play. And Lebanon did not believe that Hariri really resigned. He was threatened in Saudi Arabia. That's what they believed. And this is basically to put pressure on the political backings or the apolitical backings of Hezbollah. Hezbollah is actually the threat that Israel wants to destroy. It's also an enemy to Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia is one who propagates and supports the Salafist militants in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, in Pakistan, Egypt, and that's where the Wahhabi ideology comes from. Hezbollah is not part of that Salafist ideology. In fact, they're fighting against it. The Iranian Revolutionary Guards, the Hezbollah militant group are fighting in Syria as we speak against Saudi US supported Salafist militants. And to the public at large, the legacy media is not telling you the truth. They're saying that Iran is the world's proponent for Islamic militantism. Don't you buy that for a second. That is Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. That's who promotes and propagates this ideology. And they want a further fracturing of the countries that are at odds with them, and that is Lebanon, and that is Syria, and Iran, as well as, to an extent, Iraq. These are all allies to Iran. And it is a war. It's a war on two fronts. It's a religious war with Saudi Arabia, and it's a military war, or a war against an Arab peoples, a subverted Arab peoples, which are the Shia, which are the minority. Saudi Arabia wants to be the lead of the Sunni Arab world. Now, a lot of these Sunni Arab countries like Algeria and Egypt, Jordan, these countries are basically Western puppets. And that's why you have turmoil in a lot of these countries over the years. And that happened in 1953 when the United States used a CIA covert operation to overthrow Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh and implement Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. And the Iranian people knew he was a Western-backed leader. It's not somebody they wanted. And then you had the overthrow of the Shah of Iran by who? The militants, the religious militants. This is what happens when you put in a dictator and you destroy the country from within by its brutal regimes, usually an intelligence-supported regime, and they destroy the country from within. And then the United States gets involved and wants to oust the dictator by by subjecting it to harsh economic sanctions. We saw this in Iraq. We're seeing it in Iran. And what happens is this is what causes a civil war within the country. And then when the country is weakened, then the U.S. has its excuse to invade it militarily. That's how you destroy a country. And that's how it was in the Middle East for the past 40 years. It failed in Syria. It was worked in Iraq twice, and now it may be working in Iran, but Iran is a very steely country. They have great resolve. This is not a country that should be enemies with us, or Lebanon, or Syria. And what we need to do is put the threat or the harsh disputes and economic sanctions on the countries that deserve it. And that is Saudi Arabia. And if you want to get technical, even Israel. But it won't happen. Why? Because we have a government that is bought and paid for by foreign lobby dollars from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf and Israel. They're deep entwined. And until the public recognizes that, we will witness the suffering of the Arab people as well as our own.